Oh, hello there. I'm Jimmy Shuker, alongside Albert Chalmers, and this is Radiant Light, a spiritual discussion podcast, episode 12. As we transition into our martial arts mini-series, Albert has got me seriously interested in undertaking a new martial art myself. But it's been a long time since I did karate. We're talking something like 20 years. So the question is, which martial art do I undertake? We're going to be examining each martial art on an individual basis, episode by episode. And today, we're focusing on the oldest, most traditional, the most classic of them all. We're discussing Kung Fu. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as whichever platform you listen to your podcasts on. And you can even follow us on Instagram too. Radiant_light_podcast. And with that being said, let's take you to the episode. So Albert, a little synchrony of the universe here. It just happens that on the day of recording this episode, it happens to be Eid today. The Muslim
Today is Eid.
Today is the Muslim celebration of Eid.
So, Eid Mubarak, everyone.
Yeah, Eid Mubarak to our Muslim followers. Fantastic synchrony of the universe.
It happened again.
And I'd just like to point out as well, not to get too woo-woo about this, but we're hitting the record button and the sun is setting now.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's magic hour, officially.
Yeah. We're very grateful and we're very privileged to be able to record this episode in this moment.
We're back in the studio.
Yeah, back in the Radiant Light
Round
studio.
2.
Let's get into this. So, Albert, you know that I've been thinking about getting back into martial arts myself recently.
Yeah.
Wonder where I got that idea from.
Yeah, I don't know.
So it's going to be interesting to go through all the different forms of martial arts and figure out which one or which path I could potentially take. Where should we start with Kung Fu?
Well, you remember that when we did the Shaolin episode, we were talking about that was the birthplace of Kung Fu and Zen Buddhism.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
The main thing is that they're intrinsically linked. They have the same place of origin in that sense.
Mm. And was Kung Fu the original martial art from Shaolin Temple? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah. Shaolin is the umbrella term for the styles of Kung Fu that originated there. But the word or the name Kung Fu just means a skill that is very difficult to master or that requires a great deal of effort to master. So technically anything could be a Kung Fu.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that because so what you're telling me is that's the original term for the word. Yeah. But I understood from my research that at some point in history the word Kung Fu kind of got changed slightly, or the definition became changed when Kung Fu arrived in the West.
I know that Wushu is the modern term for martial arts in China. And Gong Fu is a more general term. But when you speak of Shaolin Gong Fu, they're pretty much just talking about those martial arts specifically. Okay. Even though they offer other skills in the temple of Shaolin. It's like
I see.
Shaolin Gong Fu is Chinese boxing with this kind of Buddhist influence.
So, I mean, you know already that in terms of martial arts, karate is my background. It was Shotokan karate specifically. So, are there similarities? Well, presumably there are similarities and differences with karate and kung fu. Like, what could you tell me about that?
Karate does actually have its roots in Chinese Gong Fu, but it's the southern styles of Gong Fu which came later. So, I mean, if you trace it back, you can follow Shotokan from Japan to Okinawa, from Okinawa to southern China, and then obviously from there you can go back to Shaolin. So karate is a Japanese, well, it started in Okinawa, but it comes from China originally, so they are directly linked. It's called the Fujian White Crane style that became the original styles of karate.
The white crane, so based on an animal again.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, because my understanding was that kung fu was based on the actions of the tiger or the leopard.
Those are just two of the styles that they have. There's many, many, many. There's like 5 major ones: the dragon, the crane, the snake, the leopard, and the tiger.
Okay.
But then there's more than that as well, and a lot of them are animal styles.
I love the fact that they're all based on animal styles. I had no idea that that was the case until you told me the other day. But it does make sense when you kind of look at the physical movements and the shapes. You say, oh yeah, okay, I can see the origins of that there.
It's funny though. There's a famous boxer, Roy Jones Jr., and he emulated cockfighting, like male chickens.
Wow. Okay.
He grew up. I think his father did cockfights, so he watched chickens fighting.
Aha.
And his father was his boxing coach, and through that he created his style. And if you watch his style, he bobs his head like a bird, he flaps his wings, like the exact movements. And he was one of the greatest boxers of all time.
Feels like there's something quite zen about that. He's clearly observed something with a plain mind and was able to receive what was around him. Very zen, I would say.
You can see the influence of Zen and why the animal styles are so popular and important, and they were the first ones, right?
So what I'm just trying to drill down into is this comparison between karate and kung fu. If I was to watch a man doing kung fu here on my left and another man here doing karate on my right, what am I physically going to see in terms of the style?
You'd immediately know who the karate guy was because he's probably going to be wearing a gi, which is their uniform, the Japanese. But the gi comes from judo. Okay. Because like I said, karate comes from Okinawa, so it's not technically Japanese.
Okay.
Japan didn't acquire the kingdom of Okinawa until later. It became part of the Japanese country, right? Okay. So the gi became part of it, and also they added kicks from like savate, which is a French martial art, to make it distinct from what was called karate, means empty hand. But before that it was called just te, I think. It was like just hand, Chinese hand, they called it. Chinese te.
The te is the hand.
And they were like, we can't call it that because Japan is not China. They wanted to distinguish themselves.
Okay.
So you'll notice that.
So when you say the karate man is wearing a gi, immediately I'm picturing a white gi specifically. Is that the case? Or
there are other colors, definitely, but white is the main. Because you start with the white belt as well.
Yeah.
So the idea was that when you get the different belts, it's because your belt is getting dirtier over time because you don't wash it after you train it, because it's supposed to maintain all your...
Really? That's what it symbolizes. I love the way there's just like a code or a symbolization for almost everything.
Yeah, but karate is very Japanese, but like the man who created Shotokan, he came from Okinawa, brought it to mainstream in Japan. So Shotokan is worldwide, maybe the most mainstream, especially when we grew up after Karate Kid came out and stuff.
Yeah.
It was just so... It's a point fighting style, so you land a strike, you reset, you get a point. And the main style of Kung Fu you would see in a fight would probably be Wing Chun, which is a lot more hand techniques. It's the one Bruce Lee was trained in. Okay. So you'd see a guy doing like a lot of this stuff, and the karate guy would be throwing a lot of kicks, a lot of cool like side hops.
And what is
and out.
What is the kung fu guy wearing?
The gi. Oh, the kung fu guy?
The kung fu guy.
Just like a Chinese... They don't have like a uniform, like a Chinese shirt kind of thing.
When I'm picturing kung fu, I'm picturing Bruce Lee, black trousers, no top.
Yeah, but he always has his Chinese shirt on and then he takes it off, right? Because when you've seen those fights with Bruce Lee and the karate, that's what it would look like. in the
Right,
shortest
okay.
form I could say. But I was trying to explain it without. Maybe you haven't seen a Bruce Lee movie, but if you've seen a Bruce Lee movie, you've seen what we're talking about.
Yeah.
The thing is, Bruce Lee wasn't just a kung fu guy. He evolved his Wing Chun into something else. He created his own style of kung fu, a very unique style.
Yeah, I mean, you said right from the beginning there's so many different styles of kung fu. What was Bruce Lee's style specifically then? How did he transform kung fu?
The long version is when he came back to the United States after learning Wing Chun from Ip Man, who is the most famous Wing Chun practitioner of all time. He's considered the Grand Master, right? The
Okay.
Grand Master, the Shifu, like the greatest Shifu of Hong Kong throughout
Uh-huh.
World War II and everything. There's movies about him. He moved to the United States after training with Ip Man, and he started a school called Jun Fan Gong Fu, which was
Okay.
his name in Chinese, Jun Fan. Bruce Lee is his American name. So when he lived in
Okay.
China, he had a different name, Jun Fan. And he came
Right.
back to the States and started a school, Jun Fan Gong Fu, which was his own system, but it was mostly based on the Wing Chun still. And then he had a conflict with the Chinese population who said he was teaching to Caucasians and Negroes, and
Oh, really?
this was basically haram for them. I don't know what the Chinese word, but it's like
yeah.
a no-go. So he had to fight another Chinese Kung Fu master, and whoever
Oh,
won
wow.
the fight, like
Really?
if
Is that how this was determined?
this literally happened, yeah. So Bruce Lee um, beat this guy and won his right to teach in America. So
Wow.
that's why it's so of importance, not only from film and all that, but he created another style called Jeet Kune Do, which was much more like MMA of today, basically. He brought in he said, why should I just teach white and black people Kung Fu? Why don't I learn from Japanese people? And opened his mind and said, I'll learn judo, Muay Thai, wrestling, boxing, fencing, savate. And his book
Okay.
has all these illustrations of different styles and different. He also did Tai Chi growing up, apparently.
Okay.
So, which is the other thing we'll talk about in the future, but it's connected to Kung Fu.
Is there a belt system in Kung Fu in the same way that karate has? Like, I remember when I did karate, I started with a white belt, and then you level up to a yellow belt, and through the grading system. Like you said earlier, the belt kind of gets dirtier and
Yeah.
dirtier. Is that the same with
You
Kung
got a
Fu,
belt
or-
when you did your graduation. You'd have to do show the different kata. Is that how you usually got the grading system?
Yeah, the kata was a huge part of it. I'm trying to recall this now. I mean, it was a long time ago. What
How
was
old
I?
were you?
I would have been 12, 13, 14 maybe, that kind of
Okay.
age.
Really?
Actually, maybe I started a little bit younger than that. Maybe it was, say, 10 to 13, but it was something around that remit. And yeah, I remember performing moves, and it eventually all built up to the kata at the end. This is the full sequence of moves, from A to Z. And I'm just trying to recall if we had sparring as well as part of the grading system.
So they call sparring kumite,
Okay.
and I also did Shotokan. So when I got my yellow belt, which is the first belt after white belt, I remember vaguely that I did some kumite. And then when we started doing the kata again, I was kind of like, oh, finally, now we're in the sparring. And then we're back to katas, and I was like, oh, it's just kata. Like, I just don't care. I don't think I had the attention span at that age. And even now, I'm really, as I do kickboxing and try other martial arts and stuff, I'm still really into the sparring, but I realize the importance of the other katas and things. I don't do karate now, but I understand the importance of drills and things like that. So I believe the original question was, does Kung Fu have a similar grading system? And I believe they do have sashes. It's like a silk sash that they
Okay.
tie around their waist or whatever. It's
Okay.
similar.
Right, okay. I'd imagine all of these martial arts that we're discussing in this series have various connections.
Yeah, I mean, mostly a lot of them thanks to Bruce Lee as well, too, right? So,
So did he pioneer this?
I mean, a Chinese guy practicing Muay Thai and stuff, it didn't happen. Like,
Right,
it was
okay.
like, our styles are the best and we have to defeat your styles, and the truth only lies in the winner, and the loser's style is ignored. And even to this day, people, I would say, if I'm being honest, as I follow the martial arts community, I see Gong Fu takes a little bit of a backseat to karate, because karate and Muay Thai are like the main, because they were combined into kickboxing. So Gong Fu kind of got shoved to the side.
Okay.
So it's like the legacy of Gong Fu and the legacy of Bruce Lee are kind of intertwined in that sense. Like when he died, it became, what's the big thing? Karate and Muay Thai. All these other guys, Jean-Claude Van Damme and all these guys came out in the movies in the 80s, were very geared towards karate and Muay Thai. And Gong Fu sort of went into obscurity, although it is still popular in China, you know. It's just not considered as relevant or as effective, I guess. Practicality is a big part of it.
Have you followed a lot of fights that have happened like over a course of centuries between kung fu experts and karate experts?
These famous tournaments that they talk about, the Bruce Lee film Fist of Fury, the character that he was playing was a student of a famous Kung Fu practitioner from Tianjin who fought a lot of Westerners and Japanese and was seen as kind of like a hero or a folk hero of defending the reputation of Kung Fu as well as the political independence of China at that time.
Okay.
And the Japanese apparently poisoned him, and that's where this huge rivalry really leapt into another a level like beyond the average rivalry, I would say.
Well, tell me more. When you say beyond the level, like,
Well,
what do you mean?
That's what the legend is, that the Japanese couldn't defeat him in a fair fight, so they just poisoned him. And that's why this rivalry exists, basically. I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than that, but it was a big event.
Yeah, I mean, to actually poison the man, it's like, wow.
Yeah, they took it pretty seriously.
Yeah.
Martial arts is kind of a serious thing, but when you look at the origins with the Zen Buddhism, it's supposed to be a pacifistic community, and the violence is part of that. It's like being violent without having hatred in your heart.
It's kind of like how we spoke about the other day, having the heart of the Buddha but the hands of a demon.
Right, exactly.
The ability to fight, but obviously in a peaceful context. You know, you're coming from a perhaps honourable.
Honourable, and Bushido and all that is supposed to be about honor amidst violence, really.
Yeah.
How to balance the two. So that's why it draws me to it. Is kind of, it's not about hatred. It's about having fun and learning and getting better. Self-improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's in the spirit of Zen, isn't it?
Totally. Even I didn't realize it until recently, more so. Even though I kind of knew it intellectually.
What do you mean by realize it? Like
have a personal relationship to the inner teachings and the sort of philosophical. I wouldn't say it's a religion, but to me, martial arts almost represents what a religion would represent to somebody else, kind of.
Okay, so do you mean a bit like how in some of our early episodes we talked about how Buddhism is more of a philosophy as opposed to a religion? it kind of like the link between martial arts and Zen Buddhism. It's like a philosophy, an honourable way of life. One can defend himself if he must. That kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think I don't even look at it that way either. As like self-defense, people think martial arts and you can defend yourself. If that, I would say I would try and avoid that by having good karma and stuff. Like I avoid violence by not picking fights with people. And I think a lot of the nicest people are fighters, MMA fighters and stuff. Because they're dealing with their hatred or anger or aggression or whatever you want to call it, in a much positive way, as opposed to holding it inside all your life and being pent up and filled with rage. If every time you have to like bury your anger down, it's creating a monster.
So you mean they're taking the anger that they may have inside them from like a past trauma and expressing it into a fighting form, like a more artistic form, as opposed to
basically
running into collisions in everyday life?
Yeah, basically. It makes you less liable to have these sort of weird unresolved conflicts in your mind that don't really exist in reality. Like you've never actually expressed your feelings in that sense. I think for me it's just kind of like making everything I do more direct. If I have a thought, whoosh, if I have to do something, whoosh, it's done. You're not sitting around thinking about it.
You've got a purpose behind everything. You're gonna you have that thought. You're gonna act on it, or you're not gonna act on it. And if you are, there's no deliberation. You're gonna. Yeah.
It helps with procrastinating and just being effective, I guess.
So in terms of procrastinating and being effective as well, I've procrastinated a little bit over which martial art I should take. Mm-hmm. What would you say are the pros and cons of Kung Fu? Why would I or wouldn't I go down this road?
Okay. Specifically...
Okay, so specifically we're talking about Kung Fu here. That's the purpose of today's episode. And I'd just like to remind you, my entire mental hold-up, if you like, was... I got all the way to brown and 2 stripes in Shotokan karate, and at that stage, at whatever age I was, 13, I decided to myself, you know what, man, I don't feel like I can fight any more than I could from the beginning. So I felt imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. I gave it up at that really late stage, like so close to a black belt. So it was all in my mind, like you was just saying.
Right.
That's the angle that I'm coming at it from. I want to feel that if I needed to fight, I could.
Okay, so is Kung Fu the most practical or effective martial art in the world? Probably not.
What do you mean by practical and effective?
Like, if you're thinking from a purely, I'm going to learn how to defend myself from, like, an attacker, like, is that... Cause if then, I would say no. Honestly, but you could.
Why so?
Because
if I practice Kung Fu, why would I not be able to defend myself in a fight? Have I missed something?
A few things. They don't live spar very frequently. It's not part of their curriculum to like live spar.
So it's more kata based.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I'd probably love it then. Probably be quite good at it.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, if that's what I'm saying though. If your goal is to just get back into it because you actually enjoy the kata, then Kung Fu is probably a great choice because, like, especially Shaolin, those guys are flipping around and doing amazing things, and it's all based on these forms, and they learn it from a master, and there's a lot of Buddhism involved and a lot of...
From the enjoyment point of view, it sounds like Kung Fu would be really fulfilling for me.
And you'd be in amazing shape and everything. And I'm not saying you couldn't defend yourself. Those gentlemen... could definitely defend themselves against an attacker or whatever. But I mean, if your goal is to just learn self-defense, there are other ways to do that without all the extra... I mean, a lot of it is showy. It's to create an image as well.
Okay.
You don't need to do a backflip when you're defending yourself. It just
Yeah,
looks
yeah,
fucking
absolutely.
awesome, right?
Yeah, of course.
I
Yeah.
mean, it might take a lot of energy, but the energy you gain from that kind of training, it just like levels you up so much.
It sounds to me like kung fu is an art in the same way I saw Shotokan karate as an art. Like, I hope I've not been overly negative about karate here. I very much enjoyed the art side of it. I felt very artistic and like I could perform with the kata sense. From what you're telling me now, kung fu sounds really similar.
Yeah. So Shotokan has live kumite or sparring, but it's point style. So you're getting. It's a lot of emphasis on being the first to land a strike, and then that's the main focus, right, in Shotokan. But
Yeah.
in
I,
Gong
I
Fu,
remember you slightly touched and you'd
yeah,
earned the point for it to kind of display that I could have connected, I could have punched you, but I'm holding back. It's like a little
yeah.
flick on the body, yeah. But continue. Kung Fu is
So that's more of it's more live sparring than what you would see in Shaolin. But in Shaolin, um, you're taught to like getting hit in that same way, like just touching you. It's not about that. It's being rigid and strong in any situation. And like if I was to hit somebody, they wouldn't even feel it because they're so well trained.
right.
The
Okay.
conditioning side of it is so real. Shotokan is more about speed and accuracy and in and out movement.
So tell me more about this conditioning. Then it would make me physically fit
Oh yeah.
in terms of stamina.
Oh yeah. Everything. In terms of everything.
What, like a bit of bodybuilding as well, or
Like being able to like do handstands and do squats for like 30 minutes and stuff like that, kind of like just doing like this horse pose,
okay?
like this, take this stool away, and I should be able to do the whole episode like that.
Right. Wow. Because you've built
You know
up
what I
the
mean?
strength.
And it wouldn't even affect my mind. I would just be talking to you like this.
How so? How does kung fu develop one's body and mind in this way?
It's about being zen. Like that's the whole point of it.
Well, the whole point of Zen being that everything's in the mind, so to speak.
Yeah,
Your
mind
mind just
over matter,
learns to
or-
be. Yeah.
But I think, like, I had a friend when I grew up who did Shaolin Gong Fu. He went to Toronto every weekend and did Shaolin Gong Fu and learned. I mean, we kind of like goofed around. We didn't spar or anything, but we
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
fooled around, had fun. So I think like Shaolin's great, and Wing Chun is probably more for people who like the martial arts side of things, the fighting aspect. It is still like Bruce Lee grew up learning that, so it has that element of toughness to it as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And it's a lot of like this kind of hand fighting. Like you put your hand out and push against my hand, and then we kind of like learn the counters and the different attacks. They have these wooden dummies,
Uh-huh.
and they learn like all the different.
If I was to familiarise myself with kung fu, say got quite deep into it, somebody's physically coming at me for whatever reason in a pub, wants to fight me. Am I going to have more reflex actions to kind of
I
block
mean,
and defend
yeah,
myself in
totally.
that way?
If the guy's throwing like these big haymakers, you're just gonna block and then attack. I mean, I've seen Wing Chun used in self-defense type videos and stuff where there's
Okay.
an emphasis on self-defense, right?
Something else that's coming through massively here is how much more mentally tougher I would be if I undertook kung fu.
I think you'd like it because of the discipline side of it and how you're kind of into that, the Confucianist aspect of Kung Fu. It's
What kind of Confucianist aspects of kung fu are there, like in terms of discipline?
well, I'd say so Shaolin comes from the Zen Buddhism, and the Tai Chi side of it is more Taoism. So Taoism, we'll get it to that in another episode, obviously, but
Yeah, Tai
the
Chi.
Taoism is more as we've spoken about, it's more flowy and more fluid.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because Tai Chi is going to be our next episode in our martial arts mini-series, as we've termed it. And little bit of a teaser here, I know that Tai Chi is kind of heavily linked with Taoism. The meditation of the mind, connected to the flow of the Tai Chi, the movements. It's kind of like, I want to use the word sequence, but that feels like the wrong word because it's supposed to be all one move.
Yeah.
Kind of intertwined. So is Kung Fu not like that then?
Not as much. It's more like the Shotokan kata that you're used to, I would say.
Right, okay.
Like a move followed by a move, followed by a move, followed by in a sequence. Okay. Whereas the other one's not as much of a sequence as it's just one continuous...
Tai Chi is one continuous flow. This has been a fascinating conversation here today, and it's given me a lot to think about now. Thank you. Feels like Kung Fu would be something that I'm more familiar with than I possibly thought I might have been. Thank you. Feels like Kung Fu would be something that I'm more familiar with than I possibly thought I might have been.
Actually, yeah.
Well, we'll talk about Tai Chi, as we said, in our next episode of the martial arts mini-series. But until then, stay zen.
Stay zen.
Okay, that appears to be all we have time for on today's episode. Don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as whichever platform you listen to your podcasts on. And you can even follow us on Instagram too, radiant_light_podcast. And until next time, good night, God bless, and namaste.